Hey, David, what would be your biggest criticism of the left in America? This is a great question, and I addressed this a little bit on the Joe Rogan program. I addressed this a little bit on the Monday show this week in talking about these groups that have cropped up, like, for example, progressives against David Pakman and Sam Cedar. As many of you probably know, I am against toxic identity politics, but I don't think toxic identity politics is as big of an issue on the left as some think it is. When I see identity politics used as a cudgel, I call it out. But mostly, my view on identity politics is we all should have a say, and we should be aware that people whose identity relates to the issue at hand in some particular way might have valuable insight, which we should listen to. Wow, hugely controversial, right? But that's my view. When it comes to SJW, whatever, right? I mean, okay, there are people who in any movement can take things too far, but big picture, SJWs are not the problem on the left. Antifa, okay, to the extent Antifa has been violent, I'm against it. But Antifa is very small and it is not representative of the left's issues in any kind of big picture sense. So what I do think is a problem on the left that worries me is the too rigid definition of what is acceptable within the left at this point in time. I'm not going to redo this entire commentary because I did it on Monday, but there's a really good article in Politico by Joshua Seitz called Progressives Should Read Progressive History so that they don't blow it this time. When you go back to the progressive movement of the early 1900s, when you go to the New Deal era of the 30s, and you see the huge successes that progressives accomplished, when you look at conservatives in the 70s and 80s, the conservative coalition of the 70s and 80s, they accomplished stuff I don't like, but part of what they did in progressives in the early 1900s and in the 30s and conservatives in the 70s and 80s is that they didn't define their movement so narrowly that over a 10% disagreement or a 20% disagreement, they cut people out from even being allowed to work together where they agree. So I'll give you some examples. There is a disagreement on the left about whether Nicolas Maduro is a good guy or not a good guy, whether he's been good or bad for Venezuela. I think that the evidence is strikingly clear that Chavez Maduro have been a disaster for Venezuela. But it doesn't really matter if people disagree with me on that, if we are united in the reality that the United States should not intervene. The United States' involvement in regime change in Latin America has been a disaster, that we need to keep John Bolton away from Venezuela. We need to keep Trump away from Venezuela. Every time I say this, the comments, 99% are about how dare I am a shill for the centrist CIA right, or I don't even know what, everything because of being Jewish. That's why I have, it's crazy. We all agree the U.S. shouldn't intervene in Venezuela. So let's focus on that, right? Another example can be, I mean, I don't know, there are so many of these. When it comes to the impeachment of Donald Trump, increasingly the left is united that there have been impeachable offenses and that at minimum an inquiry should start. And very often you will see a division start because some people believe the Mueller report and others on the left seem to believe the Barr letter. If either way you think, aside from, quote, collusion, that there is impeachable activity that Donald Trump has engaged in, why are we arguing about collusion at this point? It just doesn't make any sense, aside from the fact that there were very few people on the left who actually were expecting evidence that Trump personally colluded with Putin. I mean, I don't know who was expecting that. I said in April of 2018 that I wasn't. So the real concern for me is that I don't want the progressive movement to draw lines so narrowly about what is acceptable, either via litmus tests or whatever, that people who could get together and accomplish 80% of the agenda on which they agree are going to instead end up being enemies or at least adversaries or at least talking past each other and not working together because of some 10 or 20% of the agenda on which they disagree. That's what I think is the biggest problem with the left right now.